Okay, so some of you may know me, some may not. Probably you do, because I think for the most part, invited friends and family, church members, people I've been to retreats with over the years, and also those who were on the meditation in the Keys to the Kingdom last year. But in case you don't, my name is Tim Wertz, and I'm doing this series of webinars called The Gospel of Wow, which I'll explain that whole name coming up. And this is really officially the first session. I know we had one in August, but that was kind of an introduction. But this, I would say, would be the first session. And it's just something I really want to share, right? A lot of people have had experiences throughout their life, and they come to different conclusions on what life's all about. And for me, I would say the deepest spiritual realization, the gift from God that I've ever received, and I would say it was something I received, was just the simple preciousness of life, right? And I forget it all the time, but remembering it definitely helps. So I'm calling this series The Gospel of Wow, Meditations on the Preciousness of Life. And I really want to make it, unlike me up here talking as a talking head, I want to add images. I want to add pictures. So I'm going to share some, essentially a presentation, but hopefully you'll find it very, very helpful. It was fun to build, even though quite stressful, because it did take some time, but let's get started. All right. So the Gospel of Wow, I'm calling it the greatest hits. I'm just kind of playing on the tune of an album. I grew up loving albums, right? Something that at least my children know nothing about. So if we're talking about meditations on the preciousness of life, then let's just start by asking the question, how can we realize the preciousness of life? How can we make real? We could talk about it, we can put it on a bumper sticker, we can do it in Facebook, but how can we make it real? I think that's important. For some people, and for a lot of people, me included, nature tends to make it more real. I love getting out in nature. Perhaps you do too. I would say simply getting older, which of course we all are. And as we get older, we realize, at least it could be on the back half of life, but that too can just make us realize that life is precious. Additionally, just simply growing in wisdom, right? Just living life and thinking about things and responding to things in a certain way and seeing what works, what doesn't work, can bring us to this realization. And then there's a few ways of doing it that may not seem especially, may require something from the outside affecting us, right? Father Richard Rohr often says that transformation occurs with great love and great suffering. And I'm hoping that all of us have the privilege of having like great love in our life. We all, I'm sure, to different degrees have suffering. And either you can think of situations yourself, or you can definitely think of others where there's no doubt that you love something. It could be a person, a child, family member, a friend, whatever. Or even something that you love doing. Think of like Van Gogh having to paint. That great love just makes life so precious. You would do anything. You would literally die for someone else. But also suffering. Suffering will make us reflect on life in a different way, often, sometimes quickly realizing the preciousness of life. Another way are near-death experiences. You often hear about people having these near-death experiences and they come back different, right? Even if it doesn't stick, they come back often like, wow, right? The life as we experience it is so much more. Fear is gone. more full of life. So I don't recommend that unless you've had one. I wouldn't recommend it. Then there's folks that have spiritual awakenings, or what we'd call spiritual realizations. They're just these profound realizations, right? And whatever triggered them, sometimes people try to figure it out. Often it's just a gift, or perhaps a burden, I don't know. But you can think of people who have had this, and their life was one way, and then it's a different way. You know, Eckhart Tolle, it's kind of a modern day story, but there's so many mystics. I mean, Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus had this. Jesus, even, when he's in the Gospel of Mark, gets baptized, has his experience, and it says the Spirit drives him into the desert, try to figure it out. But it doesn't have to be Judeo-Christian. It could be anywhere, any person, any gender, any color that can have these type of realizations. Who knows? Even maybe apes have them. I don't know. But they can impact you. However, you cannot make this kind of thing happen to you. You can't force it. So if you've had different spiritual realizations, that's good, but you can't force it. Another way of realizing the preciousness of life, and where I want to share with you, is this contemplation of wow. Right now, I'll talk a little bit about what wow means, but really, I think this is a way where we can practice, contemplate, think about, sit with, ponder. We can practice this, and actually helps us, at least it helps me, realize this preciousness in which, this life in which we live. All right. So why contemplate wow? It's a question. I mean, why do you need to contemplate it? And I want to share a story to kind of answer the question. And it's a story that David Foster Wallace, if you're familiar with him, he wrote a very large book called Infinite Jest. He also wrote a lot of essays, a great thinker. And he was given a commencement speech at Kenyon College in 2005. And he told a story at the beginning of that speech called "This is Water." So let me share it with you. So there's two fish, he said young fish, and they're swimming, two young, let's say male fish. And they're swimming around, chatting about whatever young fish talk about, maybe sports, I don't know, swimming fast, or, where they can get some food or whatever. And then this older fish comes up to them and just says in passing, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And then he swims on. So they look at each other, and one of them says, "What the hell's water?" So the point is, what is our water? What is life-sustaining? What is very precious? Obviously, water to fish is very precious. What is all around us that we just don't see or take the time to acknowledge and appreciate? And that's where I said wow comes in, right? So wow can mean different things. One, it can just be simply like this picture here, wow, right? Wow. I mean, sometimes we see things or experience things and it's like, wow. Sometimes for me, it's just like, where'd all this come from, right? Why is there existence? Why does anything exist as opposed to not exist? Right? Why is the sky so blue? And I don't talk about like just a scientific explanation. I just mean you look up there and everything's crisp. It's wow. It also could be wow as in, wow, how can we treat each other so poorly? Wow, why is this situation the way it is? But the thing about wow, if you open to it, it can actually expand our experiences, right? We tend to kind of hunker down and build our walls, but wow can open us up. So that's one way. I mean, wow, just a simple use, how everybody uses wow. There's another way, and I like to call these postures toward life, perhaps, that help encourage this wow, this openness to wow. And the first W would just be wonder. So you're filled with wonder. You just are in life and you allow wonder to just fill you. And what often will happen is awe will come. You know, you could be awestruck at things if you just open and look around and experience. And along with this wonder comes curiosity. And it could be curiosity in a natural way about how nature is, curiosity and cosmology, or it could be, we could be more curious about how other people see things, right? As opposed to just holding firm in our own beliefs and everything. So wow is a wonder, awe-struck, curious position toward life. Now the O would be open, as an open-minded, open-hearted, being more open to life. Now, a lot of times we're not open because you can get hurt. But nonetheless, if you've got this one life, right, we can be closed. And sometimes it is good to close down, build boundaries. But for the most part, wouldn't it be more life fulfilling to open, right? To open. And that means receptive, right? We are receiving, we are more vulnerable. We have to, we could receive more. So open, you're looking around, you're receptive. And that's a posture that we can have in life as we live it. And then the last W is willing, being willing to engage life. It doesn't mean you got to go and change the world all by yourself. It could just be the simple things in your everyday life already to engage in life, right? Life engagement in whatever simple way that calls you. It could be doing some things that you've always wanted to do, but also be saying no to things that you need to stop. But this willingness to engage requires a level of trusting in life. And if you're religious, then it's a faith, right? It's a faith in God and life and moving forward to engage in life. So this is another way we can practice wow. It's by embodying these types of postures, these views about life. So in this series, we're going to approach these, I'm calling them wow factors, through stories. And I like the word stories as opposed to truths or whatever, because stories, if you think about it, stories are what we live in. There's a story, I have a story about who I am, what I do, what my family, who my family is, my friends. We got stories upon stories upon stories upon stories, all interwoven, right? And I like the word story because it built into the word story, that even if it's true to you, it may not be 100% true. There's some flexibility in story, right? There's some acknowledgement and humility in story. But nonetheless, stories are what we do, what gets you out of bed every morning, what encourages you to do what you do. So we're going to have these stories of wow. There will be 5. So each session will have a story of experience. Book learning on its own, even if it's scripture, but not experienced, is not really learning. It's just stuff in your head. So each session will have an experience. I'll share an experience. Story of science. Now, science is a story. It's a very powerful story. It's one of the most powerful things that's ever occurred on this planet since the, let's say, the evolution and then the embrace of science. We've had tremendous impact on the planet and our own lives. And then there's the story of scripture. And some, I have friends that's like, why even fool with scripture? Right? That's old stuff or whatever. But totally acknowledging that there's been wars, there's been positions, there's been horrible things that people have used scripture to justify. There are also much wisdom in Scripture. And our goal as human beings, at least mine, because I'm called to work with Scripture, is to highlight best I can, right, how Scripture can be life-changing and how it possibly and often can answer questions that perhaps science doesn't even try to ask. Then stories of song. Our culture is such a powerful thing, right? And out of culture comes all type of artwork and creation. We seem to be, because we do live in stories, we seem to embrace story and songs, whether it be your favorite miniseries or movies or books or artwork. So I just wanted to kind of add that to the series, songs as in specifically 1970 songs that I grew up with. So we'll have story of song. And then the story of stillness, of contemplation, of meditation. Now, we may not always just sit in silence, because a lot of you have experience with meditation and many of you may not. So these may be guided meditations, or they may be contemplations just to allow perhaps the teaching or what we're going over to sink in at a different level. So those are the 5 stories of wow that we'll include in each session. Session 1 is the cosmic heart. And the thing about this cosmic heart, it's just a metaphor, obviously. It's the heart of the matter, if you will. It's the essence, I would say, of creation. It's extremely creative, because if you just look at life itself, it's constantly creating. It's often broken because there is suffering and sacrifice and hurt. That seems to be part of the fabric of existence. It is transformational, as in having a change of heart. And it is loving, because how can you go, as we'll see in today's session, from nothing to us right now talking to love, care, compassion, and their alternatives, without something bringing forth love. But the key thing here is that, as all spiritual teachers have taught, there's nowhere you need to go. It's here. Whatever you're looking for is here right now. You don't have to wait for the future. It's now. And it's good. You don't have to fear. So let's get started. All right. And I do want to give some credit to some of the people who have influenced this particular title. This is not only the teachers I've had over the years, but Ken Wilber and his cosmic consciousness was a big influence for me, especially in the 90s when I really dug into his work. But more recently, in the 2000, Father Richard Rohr, who just wrote a book, The Universal Christ. But everything he's talked about and written prior to that has been a huge influence on me. And also one time, the first time I think when I traveled to Europe for work, I don't know if it was Spain or Italy, I think it was Spain. But the Sacred Heart, the image of the Sacred Heart or the Immaculate Heart, I'm not sure what it's called. I'm not Catholic, right? We didn't have this image, but I remember seeing it. And there was a spiritual epiphany then and there, right? So that image itself, without any words or thoughts or concepts, greatly impacted me. And then I must say that growing up in the country and loving not only music, but comic books, I've got to give credit to comic book characters like Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel. They took me to another place, right? They open up the possibility that life is an adventure, it's enchanted, it's magic, and And I'm still very grateful for the creators of all those comic books. It brought me great joy. So the question I want to ask you today, do you realize the magic of existence? I'm using magic intentionally. I could say the mystery, and existence is, there's a great mystery to it. There's so much we don't know. But one of the side effects of modernity is that we live in this flat, almost like this flat life, right? And it feels like there's no magic anymore. And I think we miss out on wow when we don't just acknowledge that there's a magic here. So how we're going to answer the question together is we're going to explore creation itself today. And we'll start with what I said. There's different stories. In this case, the story of experience. And I want to share with you a dream that I think I was 12. I think it was like 1977. And it was a repetitive dream. I'm sure you've had those kind of dreams before, and I've had many of those. Whether you're late for class, or you forgot you were in class, or you go to school in your pajamas. But this dream triggered something in me. I can only look back and see that it was the case. And here's how it went. The first time it occurred, I realized that I was in a dream, and I didn't see anything. I did not experience, I didn't even have a body, but I knew I was dreaming, and there was nothing but pure darkness. It's almost like your consciousness is floating in darkness. And it was horrifying. It was terrible. I remember, because I didn't know, will I ever get out of here or whatever, but I just remember, I don't even remember what I was thinking other than it was terrifying. And I can't remember if I woke myself up or if I literally passed out in the dream, if you could do that. And then it occurred, maybe a week later. I can't remember how often it would occur, but it got to the point where I was almost afraid to go in bed because it's like you're buried in mud and you can't see anything. You don't know if you're ever going to get out. But because it repeated, in some way, I got used to it, I guess. I got familiar with it, and it still created this anxiety in me. But I was like, well, I lived through it last time, maybe I'll live through it again. But then when I settled down, I felt another presence. I couldn't see anything, I couldn't communicate with it, and that sent me through the roof again. It started the whole anxiety thing, like, whoa, what is this? Is it a demon? Is it Satan? I don't know. I was a crazy kid. But it terrified me. And then that repeated. And at some point, I think I just, out of desperation, I got it, that fear turned into anger, and I confronted it. Just psychologically, just psychically, kind of like, and I've learned over the years, by the way, if you ever have a repeating dream, at some point, what has always helped me now is just to confront it. Wow. So I've been in class and I forgot about my homework. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Forgot my homework. Or I'm in my pajamas, fine, no big deal. Just confront it, accept it. So when I confronted it, it's almost like I got pulled forward and I went out of the darkness and into light. And I found myself on the moon, believe it or not. And there was this tall, I remember him being like super tall for a astronaut, and all in the astronaut outfit, kind of beckoning, like, come over here. And it was friendly. And what amazed me is, like, from that fear to that anger to such relief happened just like that. And it just, I remember thinking, wow, how can things happen that fast from an emotional point of view? But anyway, he beckoned me over and we sat or stood and watched an earthrise. It was so real. It was like, wow. Wasn't even thinking, like, how did I get up here? It was like, look at that. And he kind of communicated. We couldn't talk, but it was like, I remember just feeling the thoughts like, isn't she beautiful? Take care of her. Right. And that was the last part of that dream I've ever had. But ever since then, at first in the 70s and 80s or whatever, I was just thinking it's going to be, it must be, nuclear holocaust, got to, this, that, and the other. And now we've got environmental issues and a lot of other issues that we need to deal with. But that perspective of seeing the earth outside shifted something in me, a shift in perspective. And then in the 90s, we sent Voyager out, I don't know, probably in the 80s. And when it got the Voyager exploration probe, when it got to Saturn, Carl Sagan instructed them to turn it back toward Earth and snap pictures. So from Saturn, you can kind of see one part of the ring there on the right-hand side. You can see Earth as a pale blue dot, 3.7 billion miles away. And Carl Sagan wrote about this experience. I think it impacted everybody who did that. Didn't even think to look back. It's all forward, forward, forward. And he said, look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. Own it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives on that dot. When we see our planet from this perspective and know that everyone that we've ever loved has existed on that little dot, it too can shift our perspective. So how do we respond? Right? If you really were on the moon looking at the earth, or even at Saturn looking. So let's look at our stories of creation, because I think when you really contemplate them, let them sink in and not just blaze through them, they have a power. And I want to start first with the medieval story, because I want to show you how stories change over time. The medieval story, which had been in place, at least for the Western civilization, for quite a while, and every culture has a different creation story. It was a static creation, right? It was built and backed away. And here's a picture. Here's a map of the medieval cosmology. So you had Earth, flat, all that good stuff. You had the firmament, that's what they called it, and the stars and everything was inside this sphere, and they moved around like they moved around. Then you had the oceans of heaven, and above it you had heaven of heaven. And you had the underworld up under the ground. It was static, it didn't change. People changed, things changed, but for the most part, this was how it was built, and it just wasn't changing. And there was room. I guess if you had a soul, you literally had a place to go, heaven of heavens, right? Or you literally could go to the underworld. So that, and if you think about it, we say, well, that's not correct. People live their lives out. I mean, they did a lot of amazing things without having their story 100% correct, or even 2%. So we should be humble. And also glad that we don't have to nail our story down perfectly. Now let's look at the story of science. Now, unlike a static creation, this is a story of an evolving creation. This was a major shift in how we understood life around us. Evolving, growing, changing. And if you're probably familiar with it, the Big Bang and evolution. So before, there was nothing. And scientists, I think, refer to this as a singularity. It sounds scientific. It's basically there's one thing, not quite sure what it is, can't explain it, physics don't apply to it. It's a singularity. There's one thing, and then poof, and it explodes out. What does it explode into? Because there's no space. The Big Bang creates space, right? It's space. Space is actually expanding from what we know right now. Again, we're not 100% correct. But for a while, there's nothing but what you call quark soup. So quarks, the stuff that helps make up atoms. So soup of quark. Then it slowly goes through the process and things collapse. Giant stars create explosions, galaxies. A lot of stuff happens. We'll cut this short. A lot of stuff happens. And there's clusters of galaxies. Once we put the Hubble telescope and was able to peer into back in time, because what you see out there is what it was a long time ago. There's, I think, billions of galaxies that we can see. The universe is so much larger than we can ever imagine. But let's focus on our galaxy, the Milky Way, and specifically our solar system. So we're back here. Let's focus on our planet. Let's bring it home. Not only is she beautiful, she's very special. And these are the wow factors, I hope, that can leave you appreciative of what we have here. So wow factor number one, these are factors that allow life on Earth, right? Happen to be in the right place at the right time. So our solar system's right here. So the Milky Way galaxy, we're not in the middle of the city, so to speak, at the core. Thank God we're not. And we're not even in one of those swirls. We're kind of like out in the country. We're out from the suburbs even. We're kind of in an area of the spiral arms, which is not too congested. And that's good. Flying objects can cause problems for life. So that's one thing. We're located in a good location. Number two, our sun is mature. It's not too big. It's not too small. If it was too large, right, it would burn out quicker. If it's too small, they're too volatile, right? You wouldn't have life. So it's a perfect size. It's mature, it's steady, and and we're perfect distance from it to allow water and things that is conducive for life. Wow factor number three, Earth has a radioactive molten core. We actually have like a little sun in the middle of our planet, if you will. And because it's got a lot of reactions going on, it's churning and burning. Now, why is that important for life? Because Mars is just like, I think, a rock through and through. Well, it's important for several reasons, but the main reason I want to highlight here is that this molten moving core creates a magnetic field. That's how we have magnets, but also how we use the compass. But the wow factor isn't the fact that we can use a compass. That magnetic field is absolutely, positively critical for life because it becomes a force field that protects us of the most dangerous solar radiation that's out there. Wow factor number four is our ozone layer. So even though the solar radiation I mentioned is blocked by the magnetic, there's still a lot other type of radiation that could come through. And our ozone layer was created just millennia ago that allows life to protects, if you will. It filters out, almost like we got one force field where it goes around, and then the ozone layer filters out the other dangerous radiation. And then wow factor number five, our moon. We think, oh, well, it's good to look at, right? It's for the tidal waves, which are all cool. And, wolves howl at it. That's kind of nice. Lovers like to look at it. All that's great. But our Earth is tilted. It's tilted in its rotation. And if it wasn't for the moon actually, because it circles around us, it stabilizes our tilt. The reality is if it tilts a little bit, and it does have a wobble, we know this. Ice ages occur because it wobbles a little bit, and it just slightly changes how the sun rays hits us, and you got an ice age. Then it'll wobble back. So the moon, it just helps us be more stable. Wow factor number six, our big brothers, if you will, the larger gas planets outside the universe, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, they protect us because of asteroids and comets. Jupiter's notorious for taking a lot of hits for us, almost like it's a bodyguard to protect us from having more possibilities of getting struck by something. Matter of fact, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but this is a video, an amateur photographer who was, I guess, watching Jupiter, happened to catch, and this is not the first time, this happens quite often, but you can see these white dots where they're getting hit by an asteroid. So that's Jupiter in action, helping us out. So every time I walk the dogs at night, look down my driveway, I look up, and Jupiter, in this case, the moon right there, but the Jupiter is always straight above over here, is always the brightest thing in the sky. So if you go out and you see Jupiter, just say thanks. Number 7, we live on a living planet. And this is the magic part. We live on a living planet. You can say, well, the planet's not living. We're living, but everything came out of this planet. So the planet's living, right? And at one point in time, the planet was mostly lava. So I think it was Brian Swim who often would joke about from slow-moving lava comes life, right? Think about that. And by the way, this orangutan, I don't know if you heard about it, but this happened over in Indonesia. This was a, what was it? I think it was a zoo, and a lady dropped her sunglasses in the orangutan cage, and the mother orangutan went and got the sunglasses and put them on. And it's funny, if you watch the video, the baby orangutan will actually try to grab them and she'll slap them away. Eventually, the zookeeper encouraged the orangutan to throw them back out, which he did. So from lava, you can get orangutan with fashion. Or any pet you've ever loved or love now came from this, whether it be a dog or a cat. Every baby you have ever held, child, nephew, niece, you, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And here's where you can this is interesting. Every piece of technology we create, in this case, like a smartphone, we can say, oh, well, we created it. That too is coming from life on the planet. Technology is just, even though we're part of the planet, so technology too is part of this living planet. And whether it's a smartphone or, the robots in Wall-E, if they're peaceful, at some point in time, or heaven help us, Terminator type robots, artificial intelligence, like shown here, or even in this case from the movie Ex Machina, robots, androids that become conscious, self-aware. That too would just be the life process unfolding, all coming from this planet. And then the final wow factor is consciousness itself. And perhaps it was our ancestors many years ago looking up at the sky and asking deeper questions, or looking in water and seeing a reflection, or whatever that triggered self-consciousness. But consciousness is amazing. That's what everything we experience happens in our consciousness, right? And often we equate it to our brains. And while I won't argue that our brains are obviously part and necessary for us to be fully conscious or alive, there may be more to it than just that. And Lao Tzu of the Tao Te Ching says, right, the key to growth is the production of higher dimensions of consciousness into our awareness. So consciousness too is evolving, growing. Matter of fact, in the scientific community, as opposed to thinking that consciousness is just something that happened along the way of evolution, or that consciousness is only inside our heads, is that it's everywhere. Some form of consciousness is everywhere throughout. Particles and consciousness, material and consciousness, physical, it's all together. Matter of fact, David Chalmers of the New York University highlighted what is called the hard problem of consciousness, where he says it's very hard to get consciousness out of non-consciousness. How did this happen? We can't explain it. Erwin Schrödinger, one of the fathers of quantum physics, a deep thinker, said consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. So the reason I highlight consciousness, one, is because it is how we experience everything. And two, this is what inspires me, the exploration of consciousness, because I do feel that we must evolve our consciousness to be able to address some of the issues that we have. And also, it's kind of cool. So that was the story of science. Now let's look at the story of song. And this is a song about celebration of creation. And I'm sure many of you have heard it. I mentioned it in our last session. And it's Three Dog Night, Joy to the World. And it's pretty straightforward. Singing joy to the world, all the boys and girls, joy to the fishes in the deep blue sea, joy to you and me. It's just, to me as a kid, it was easy to sing to. It was kind of cool. And it really did feel like you were celebrating life that was given. Now, our final part, and we'll do this in a contemplative fashion, and I'll tell you how. And it's the story of Scripture. And here, it's not a static creation. It embraces, as you'll see, I think, an evolving creation. But it has an intention. This is the difference. You know, the story of Scripture is there's an intention toward life. We seem to be going in a direction. We're growing in a direction. It's not just all random and happenstance. So I think what I want to encourage you to do is get comfortable. I'm going to read some passages from Genesis. But if you will, and if you're in a location where you can, just close your eyes gently. And just begin feeling all the sensations of being in a human body. Just notice. It shouldn't require any effort. Just notice how your body feels. And now, if you feel any tension, like you're listening to me and you want to make sure you follow along, and it could be like a tension in your head, your brain, your forehead, just relax that. Just allow your mind, your body to relax. And one way to do that is take 2 or 3 deep breaths. And on the exhalation, simply allow yourself to relax even more. And as I share with you the passages of Genesis, I will make comments along the way. But just let the sounds of the words pass by you, through you, with no need of trying to figure anything out. And then allow whatever ripples occur from what is being said, allow those to come, thoughts, ideas. There's no need to deeply think about this. Just experience the sounds of words, and the sounds that comprise a story. In the beginning, now the earth existence was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Know that waters and deep, when this was written, represented mystery, unknown. So there was this formless, deep mystery. Let there be light, and there was light. Almost like a great saying yes to creation. Of having something as opposed to nothing. And perhaps light wasn't light as we experience it. Perhaps light is creation itself. And even in science, they say all things are light. All things are energy. God saw that the light was good and separated the light from the darkness. So we've went from one thing, a formless void, to two. And yet that two is still one. You cannot have light without darkness, and you cannot have darkness without light. That's day one. On day two, God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And that was called sky. In its way, it's painting the picture of the development, the growth of the atmosphere, which is the water in which we swim. Then on day three, God separates the land from the oceans, creates vegetation. Day four, the creation of celestial bodies. Now we know that the sun and the stars were created before the earth. But it's interesting what they say about the celestial bodies here in Genesis. It said they're created to mark time, to know the days and the seasons and the years. They also harmonize us to the rhythms of life. It's as if the earth is being prepared, growing, evolving. In day 5, creatures, living creatures in the water and birds in the sky are created. And all creatures are told to be fruitful. And it says, it is good. This creation is not bad, it is good. Then on day 6, living creatures on the land. And again, Genesis states it is good. And then it says, God says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. So the pronoun us is interesting. Perhaps God is, in this story, is talking to all of the creation that is already on the planet. But the key is the image of the Creator. It says, in the image of Creator, He created them, male and female. They were blessed. And we're told, we were told to be fruitful, increase in numbers from this story, which obviously mankind has. Then there's this line, it says, fill the earth and subdue it. And this passage has been used to justify a lot of things that we do to the earth. But you do know that humanity is left and has a great impact on this earth. And it's time to steward this planet, to harmonize with it. And then it ends with, God saw all that was created, and it was very good. So this creation is not something to dismiss, even in the Hebrew scripture that we just read. So continue to just sit in silence with your eyes closed. And I want to share with you what are the wow factors of life here, the realization, whether you look at it from science or scripture or just living life. We are not separate from the earth. We are fully part of the earth. We're not separate from the universe. We are the universe. The universe created the earth. We have the universe in us, and we are in it. Even though we feel separate, that's an illusion. We're not separate. We're not separate from the past and the future. Everything leading up to this moment has led up to this moment, has built the foundation of you being where you are, who you are right now. And you, whether you acknowledge it or not, everything you do and say and who you are is laying a foundation for the future. We are the past and we are the future. We're part of this one creation. Jesus said in the Gospel of John one time, he was trying to convey a message and he was praying, talking to Abba, and it was like, help me understand that I am in you, talking to God, right? You're in me, and that we're in them. We're all in each other. There's an interbeing. So we're not separate from God, however you define God, or even if you take the time to define God, we're not separate. I went through a phase where I was asking a few friends, what do they think this idea of gospel or good news is? And you'd get different answers. And then I would say, does it feel like good news to you? And then you get interesting responses, because sometimes like, no, not really. But, or some say yes. But one friend, she answered with a simple word that I'll never forget. She just simply said Emmanuel, which means God with us. That whatever created this entire thing is with us, inactive, engaging. But Emmanuel, as Richard Rohr often says, is God with us, but also know that God is in us. And God as us. Now, what does that mean? That all the experiences we have, every experience that has ever been experienced, is being experienced by God, by the creation, by life. So I want to quote Ralph Waldo Emerson, and then it will lead us into a short guided meditation. And Emerson had his own spiritual experiences that he would share. Of course, if you know him, he was one of the transcendentalists. And this is a quote. He says, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. The ego goes away. The sense of self goes away. I became a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being, the universe, circulate through me. And as you know from today, that the universe does circulate through me, from the blood, the air, the oxygen, the skin, everything was created in the heart of a sun. And he says, I am parcel of God. There's no separation. We're not alone. So now, for the remaining few minutes, we're going to have the story of stillness. We're not going to think about creation or scripture or science. We're just going to experience creation is who you are. So continue to sit. And feel the sensations of breathing. Notice the rhythm. You do not have to breathe life breathes through you. There's nothing you need to do. Now feel all the sensations of being in your body. The pressure of the seat, the chair, any aches or pains, the tingling, feel the aliveness of being embodied. Now allow your awareness, your attention to just receive all the sounds in your environment. Notice that the sounds come and go on their own. There's nothing you need to do. Almost relax totally and just receive all the bodily sensations and the sounds together. Be open and receptive. Billions of years has led up to this very moment. To these very experiences. You need not do anything other than be still. If thoughts arise, which they do, just treat them like sounds in the room. And notice that they come and go on their own also. What you are experiencing by no means is mundane, boring. It is magic and mystery. Even if you find yourself trying to figure things out or wonder if you're doing this right, allow those thoughts to be accepted and included also. Receive and accept whatever is happening now without any conditions. And even if you find yourself thinking and captured by an idea, that too is just another experience. Simply let go, open, and allow all thoughts, bodily sensations, sounds to mix and mingle, be present. For our final minute together, what if there was no problem? There was nothing you needed to do. But receive life as it is. On your next inhalation, breathe in a bit deeper, filling your lungs, holding it if you can for just a moment. Then exhale, open your eyes,